Amendment proposed by Senator Plett to motion 474. Essentially, I would submit that Senator Plett's amendment is out of order.
At the outset, I want to make clear that I present this point of order purely as a matter of procedure. I believe it would produce a negative precedent which would allow senators to use procedural tactics to derail motions that seek the creation of special committees to study public policy issues of importance to Canadians. Senate Procedure in Practice at page 90 identifies 6 factors that govern the receivability of amendments to motions. One of these motives is that the amendment cannot negative the core of the main motion. As our Speaker stated in his ruling on the receivability of an amendment to Senator Smith's motion 435, which has now been withdrawn, an amendment that can be understood as effectively a rejection of the main motion is cause for serious concern. The original motion, moved by Senator Plett, proposes the creation of a special committee on prosecutorial independence. Indeed, the very heart and core intent of the original proposal is the creation of this special committee. It is provided for in the very first line of the motion. Speeches made on debate by Senator Plett, Miville Deschênes, and Batters focus on the creation of this special committee. A review of the answer shows that motion 474 is identified as, and I quote, motion to strike special committee on prosecutorial independence, end of quote. In short, Senator Plett's amendment removes the pillar of motion 474 because in its fit and substance, the amendment seeks to change the motion so that the Senate not create a special committee on prosecutorial independence. Senator Plett's amendment amounts to a rejection of the core feature of Senator Plett's proposal. Indeed, Beauchesne and House of Commons Procedure and Practice state that a proposal contrary to the main motion or one that is essentially a new proposal should not come before the Senate by means of an amendment. It requires a separate notice. Honourable Senators, even assuming that the amendment was not seen as an expanded negative or as an outright rejection of motion 474, it is still out of order because it undermines the principle of motion 474 and because it falls outside its scope. On this point, our Honourable Speaker recently noted as follows in his ruling of April 4, 2018, and I quote, "The issue of the receivability of amendments usually arises in terms of proposed changes to bill where issues of principle, relevancy, and scope have been examined with some regularity, as noted in ruling of December 9, 2009. It may generally be helpful to view the principle as the intention underlying a bill. The scope of the bill would then be related to the parameters the bill sets in reaching any goals or objectives that it contains, or the general mechanism it envisions to fulfill its intention. even if the amendment is not as an expanded negative. Senate precedents show that amendments to add significant new elements to a motion have been found to be out of order. I would, for example, refer honorable colleagues to the decision of September 9, 1999, dealing with an amendment to expand an investigation about action by the Canadian forces in Somalia to include Croatia, as well as a decision of September 19, 2000, which would have tacked on to a proposal to establish two new committees elements relating to the size of all committees and the process by which members are chosen. End of quote. The intention underlying Motion 474 is for the Senate to strike a special committee on prosecutorial independence to study certain issues identified in the motion. Furthermore, the parameters that Motion 474 set in reaching its goal and objective, or general mechanism, it envisions to fulfill its intentions squarely involve the creation of a special committee. By removing from Motion 474 the creation of the Special Committee on Prosecutorial Independence and transforming it into an order of reference to the Senate Standing Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Senator Plett's amendment undermines the principle of Motion 474 and falls well outside the parameters that are set to reach its goal and objectives. It should therefore be ruled out of order. Let me illustrate this with a few more recent examples. Earlier in this Parliament, the Honourable former Senator Watt moved to strike a special committee on the Arctic. His motion stated, and I quote, that special committee on the Arctic be appointed to consider the significant and rapid changes to the Arctic and impacts on original inhabitants, end of quote. Would it have been in order to remove the heart of Senator Watt's motion, delete the proposed creation of a special committee on the Arctic, and instead transform the motion into an order of reference to the Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs? I think not. It would have been out of scope and against the very principle of Senator Watt's motion. Also earlier, in this Parliament, our esteemed colleague Senator Mercer moved to strike a special committee on the charitable sector. His motion stated, and I quote, that a special committee on the charitable sector be appointed to examine the impact of federal and provincial laws and policies governing charities, non-profit organizations, foundations, and other similar groups, and to examine the impact of the voluntary sector in Canada. Would it have been in order to delete the proposed creation of a special committee on the charitable sector and instead transform that motion into an order of reference to the Standing Committee of National Finance? Again, I believe that such a maneuver would have been found to be out of order. Je crois fortement.
I strongly believe that Senator Plett's amendment to Motion 474 would remove the creation of a special committee on prosecutorial independence from the bill. which would transform the motion into an order of reference to the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee. So that would clearly, I am convinced that would clearly be out of order. Thank you.
Senator Plett.
Surprised anybody would clap for that. There you go. The person who had his amendment declared out of order because he completely gutted with the exception of one word. One word he left in my motion, otherwise he amended it, was declared out of order, and this one he supports. Unbelievable. Colleagues, again, as I said the other day, and I know this amazes many of you when I say I am almost speechless. This committee, this amendment that I made does not amend the motion at all. It amends the committee that it's going to. Something that we have asked right from the start. Something that we asked in Senator Smith's motion, when Senator Harder decided to gut the motion because he was afraid of it being voted on here. Then we bring in another motion. And the senator that is now saying my amendment is out of order creates an amendment to a motion that is intended to discuss and investigate prosecutorial interference in a situation specific to SNC-Lavalin, specific to one case. And she wants to bring in to that Nigel Wright, former Chief of the Prime Minister, Benjamin Perrin, Special Advisor, Ray Novak, the Honourable David Tkachuk, the Honourable Marjorie LeBreton, the Honourable Irving Gerstein, and the Right Honourable Stephen Harper, who are so far removed from my motion. And apparently this was orchestrated by the government leader who hands over the amendment to Senator Ringuette. You know where it came from? No, you don't. You don't know where it came from. And she brings that motion, that frivolous motion, that makes a mockery out of this chamber, a complete joke out of this chamber. And then I, in good faith, wanting to stay with what the intent of the original motion was, right from the get-go, the Legal and Constitutional Affairs, a duly constituted committee here, discussed the corruption that we have, and this senator doesn't want that investigated. So she brings forward frivolous motions like she did here, and then I bring one forward that is not frivolous, that in fact completely speaks to the entire intent of both my motion, Senator Smith's motion, and indeed Senator Pratt's motion. The intent of my motion, my amendment, does not at all remove the intent of Senator Pratt's motion. It is in keeping with Senator Pratt's motion entirely. Now, I haven't risen on a point of order to have this garbage taken out of that amendment, because that is out of order. That is out of order. That doesn't even speak to the motion. But that's fine. It can stay in there, because we know this is a filibuster, because you are afraid, all of you that are voting for this and that think this is relevant, are afraid of having a vote on this. So you're doing whatever you can not to have a vote. And the leader of the government is helping you along with that. I find that astounding. Let's just have a vote. Let the chips fall where they may. You don't want an investigation. You have the right to vote against that investigation. No problem. I'm happy with my vote. When I vote, I stand and I'm willing to be counted. This is what we get. So, Speaker, I have the fullest confidence that this point of order is so frivolous and so intended, again, just simply to filibuster something, that I have the fullest confidence in your ability to see through what Senator Ringuette is doing here, and hopefully will, in the fastest way possible, rule this ridiculous point of order out of order, and let's get on and vote on the motions. Thank you very much.